Did somebody record who went into open session?
Yes, it was Derek and Jordan.
I was gonna say Patrick didn't give me a piece of paper. I didn't do anything.
Okay, and we're live, so we're good. Thank you.
Good?
Yep.
Okay. All right, so we don't have anything to discuss in, item A with the action of the executive session, that was discussion. Next up is our board financial audit, and I was involved in that. And I had asked, Deb on a couple things. I asked what the folate invoice was, and that's in association to our school library account. And, Deb is just like really on the ball with things. She's like, I'll talk to Angela and we'll do this and we'll do that. That was kind of nice. The other thing that caught my eye was, that we had, like 10-cent things and $1.90, and there's a whole bunch of them, and I'm like, why are so many of these consecutive type things? And that was actually in reference to our Topper Partnership Plan. We have 2 employees that still contribute to that, and instead of writing, we get it to so far and then get a small deposit or check or whatever to these people or however it goes. So that has to do with our Topper Partnership Program. And then I asked about the Reliant Standard Life, and it's an insurance carry for our life insurance, and the numbers were just a little bit different in the funds. I paid from Fund 10 and then Fund 27 and 50, so there's all these entities come from different areas, so that was something. I had never seen anything in reference to the Topper Partnership on our accounts payable letter before, so that really kind of threw me for a little bit of a loop and kind of all's good.
So just a quick comment on that. Our Topper Partnership is this tree that's on the outside here. It's on my to-do list, but it's always been pushed down because there's obviously other more pressing items. But we do have 2 individuals, and it's actually going to be down to 1 that still gives money to that. There's roughly 190,000 in that fund, and that can be found from our annual meeting. And my job that the board has given is just to determine it as a grant program back to our staff. And so it's in the works per se, but it's again pushed down on my priority list until I can get some of these other things completed.
Yeah, I think the only thing that we pulled up quick was the Cisco, so they do all the floors and some of the uniforms and I guess towels and stuff in the bus garage. So there's some kind of interesting differences there where I guess the ones that are used for tiny tots come out of Fund 80, so they're those the right codes, which is interesting to see. One thing with some of that, with like the recurring bills and things that we did is, just follow up on kind of are we getting our money's worth out of it? Do we ever competitively quote some of those recurring cost items or have any notice of complaint? How do we confirm that everything's kind of been done correctly, that, we don't have any issues with that service? So like I said, kind of going forward would be good to maybe challenge on some of those recurring costs.
The nice thing about the way that that accounts payable is that the information is more defined. It never was like that, so it's nice to know, oh, okay, now I get it, now I know where that went, now I get it. So with that specificity, it's really, really nice.
I will say to Jordan's point, well, number one, it's the supervisor's job to make sure that those supplies are what they need to be, and it's handled. But one of the things that we are working on is this document. It was very frustrating to know we were actually paying for services that we no longer needed. And so we compiled this document, and Krista's has done a nice job putting this all together from just one spot that shows all of our contracts, dates, and so on. We had contracts that weren't even addressed, like, updated contracts since 2015. The contract was supposed to expire in 2015, and there was no more negotiation. There was no more. We just did it because we did it the previous year. From curriculum, this is one thing that Sue, Dr. Curtis is working on. Unfortunately, we don't even have I guess, an overall folder that contains what is this class doing for curriculum, this class. I can say that when I got here, after I left New Richmond, I had to basically restart all business curriculum because it didn't exist. And so we're putting all of that together. If you look at our MOUs, if you look at our inspections and permits, and so on. So this document is basically what you're talking about, other than the part where, well, if the towels aren't soft enough, that's the supervisors to come and tell us, hey, this is not working, and then we can address it if we need to. So just so the board's aware of some of those steps that we're taking.
Well, it's good to see. That's one of my thoughts is if they're coming to replace bins or towels and nobody uses the towels and they replace them anyways, they're gonna charge us for it. So how do we, make sure we're staying on point?
Next is the review of policy 2000s.
Is there any questions on the thousands?
I did have one around ethics and conflict of interest. It calls out specifically under point A about basically, I think the intent is to say, hey, if someone has an interest in another business or some competitive entity in the amount of $15,000 or more, I don't know why it's 15,000. But I'm assuming, do we have some type of reoccurring clause that we have the employees review to make sure there's not a conflict of interest? Not that I can see many happening, but.
A lot of that policy is centered on you guys, because you're the decision makers. And so that's where you, as a elected official, are on, you're basically required to make sure that if there is any interest, it's like compensation. If your spouse works here, you should not be making or voting on that. If you have business interests or friends, and in my history, there's conversations I've had with board members that from an ethical standpoint, because they're my best friend or whatever, something that the community could call you on. The other parts, is there any others in terms of staff? Yeah, those could possibly happen. Now, again, that's where you have to make sure for your bidding process and so forth. So again, I think it's certainly not all encompassing, but I think it's a really good start. But most of that policy centers around, administrators like me making decisions, because that's what the thousands are, and then the board itself. Those are kind of the bigger ones. And I can tell you, I'm not willing to put my career on the line for any type of, friendship or business or any of those things. And that's where I've instituted that competitive bidding process, especially with the bigger items. Any others?
Well, then the other one, the second point there is B, and it's really around nepotism, more or less. It doesn't say nepotism, but it says any employee shouldn't directly supervise a relative employee by the district. And so sometimes that's hard in small communities, right? I mean, you've got the employee a large portion, and then relations are there, but hopefully we can find ways to make that work. I'm assuming we've obviously found a way to be successful around that.
Yeah, and that's typically with the nepotism piece, especially with the evaluation. So like, I don't evaluate Holly.
Right.
There's no, whether it was, and I won't name previous administrators and so on, they could directly evaluate, but from other, portions, yeah. Especially in larger communities. I mean, we've had many married individuals. So nepotism can come up in different ways, but typically that's the most common discussion centers around evaluation.
Any other questions? All right. Next is our open forum. Any community comments? All right, next is the consent agenda. Is there anything on the consent agenda that anybody would like to have pulled prior to approving it, or have further questions or discussions on quick?
Couple that I just want to point out, I'm going to take one opportunity, I'm going to go down the list here, but this boys basketball one, I want to reiterate why we got to this point. And the biggest thing is our C team, if you look at the fundraiser that we ran, again, trying to stay by the book, but for me as the superintendent, also as the boys basketball coach, unfortunately, the previous coach had 2 opportunities to get new jerseys and never took advantage of that. So the C team jerseys that we had were from the same time period as one of our assistant coaches, Nathan Hoffman. So we did a fundraiser, which is outlined right here. And if kids sold 15 cards, they would get a backpack. And kids did well. We actually just, we got these jerseys, and then, so basically what you're approving tonight is the donation. We have some individuals that gave donations directly to the program to be able to purchase these, which was around 3,100. And then we had the players sell these cards to make up some of those other funds. So again, tonight's approval is just not only to recognize those individuals that gave monetary amounts, but also the fact that these are 3,000 worth of jerseys that are now being donated to the school. And again, that happens with wrestling, with the Booster Club, and as you know, the wrestling mats. There's other groups that do that too. Last year, the pink jerseys for football, the Booster Club bought them. So a lot of generous pieces. And one thing I think Krista has done nicely is she recognizes those individuals on social media too. And that's my goal here is if you look at, even if they give $10, let's recognize, because that might be a long or a big amount for them. There's Angel Fund in here, things like that. I also want to point this one out. I met directly with Skip, who some of you know, and the former board president. And I think most of you know that Barb passed away unexpectedly. And so if you saw within the funeral requests that all amounts should be passed on in essence to the school. And so Dr. Rasmussen was headed down to his sister's home and was passing through, and he dropped off basically the $10,000 to start this scholarship. Barb was our first district nurse, and then it's a position that Jody took over after. Those of you that know Barb, she was a fantastic individual, and again, lifelong individual that gave back to the school. Dr. Rasmussen was board president, and so forth. So it's a pleasure to be able to have this on there too, and giving back to our students from here on out, especially in the health profession. So please, if you haven't read that letter, please do. Third Friday enrollment count that we use for the budget is in there, if you haven't seen that. I can say it's been great. I had another check-in meeting with Tim Corrigan based on our new supervisor buildings and grounds. We did find a mechanic, so I can proudly say since July, basically, we are fully staffed, which is a really good feeling. I'm sick and tired of being these these positions, but we have some really good people. So looking forward to that. The rest is some other discussions that we've had. I did put in there what the costs were in terms of our mechanic and the bus fleet, because that is part of the recommendation for tonight. In terms of the rooftop units, we continue to find various ones that are really and then this.
With some of those, are we kind of keeping track as we kind of have our defined budget?
Oh, I have.
What are kind of ongoing of the budget period?
I have all those details that I'll be able to pull up for our next meeting. This one, if you're not familiar with a TIF district, and a TIF is including the city, and I actually got the stomach flu, so I asked Deb to go on my behalf. The meeting lasted about 8 minutes, and the TIF district has shored up a little bit because the city did put quite a few of those parcels up for sale last year. And so I don't know if you're gonna see much revenue in taxes for those places, depends on if they wanna build. So we've seen land for sale, but the tax implication really makes a turn when somebody chooses to build. And maybe they will, maybe they won't, I don't know. And then this is the other one, and again, we'll talk about these, especially when we get to curriculum, but this is all the students that are applying for early college credits this coming spring. And so that has actually not taken place in in Glenwood. I always did it just because I want the board to understand how much are we paying for credits. I need you to see, not necessarily who's applying, but look at some of those costs so that students leave here with a number of credits and so forth. So again, I wanted to outline a couple different things in terms of consent.
Any questions that anybody has for Patrick or clarifications? If there are none, I'll entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
Motion is made by Chuck, do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Scott. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Motion carried. All right, next up is our business action items. First up is the lease purchase of the buses.
So I did send this out, must have been last week, I believe, or the week prior, but I tried to put everything on the docket. Number one, we just have a fleet that is aging. We haven't done, I would say, a quality job of looking at replacements in a timely manner. I think the one thing to consider, there's basically asking the board in terms of, do you want to lease or do you want to purchase? So I'll put it this way. Right now, we're looking at $190,000 deficit for this current budget, which is easily consumed by the fund balance that we have in Fund 10. To purchase a bus, you can see what the cost is, which is $125,000 to $140,000, etc. Purchase or the leasing, I did hear back from some board members, and I answered those questions. We do have a bus right now, and I was in contact with them. Bus 12 is worth roughly $1,000 right now, so we're not going to get any of the transmission shot, and it's not worth putting back on the road. But you can see the ones that we sold, and that kind of tells you that we haven't had a proper plan in place of our fleet. My recommendation is to go leasing just because we need a couple buses. My example also about Boyceville, I talked to Nick, and Boyceville did lease. It went well for them. What he pointed out was he had 3 buses that went down at the same time, basically. And so he's like, we don't have the cash to be able to buy buses. So again, I'm not saying that leasing is the way to go. Some districts do that because they want a constant warranty. Fiscally, I just don't feel like, we have the capital right now, because we have a variety of issues with our facilities. So from a leasing standpoint for buses, it does make sense in my opinion. But everything else I put in this document. In terms of the budget that I'm gonna ask you to approve tonight, I did put the leasing numbers in that budget, not a purchase.
Yeah, I think when if I calculated right, it was $13,286 more to lease it and then buy it. Rather than just buying it.
Oh, after 3 years or 5 years?
After for the 2 year, or 2 at 5 years, sorry, hit the 5 year.
Yeah, you're not gonna come out, I mean, leasing, obviously, you're renting, and, based on mileage and the system itself, but again, based on where we are financially, that's the part that I would have you consider.
And spreading that 13,000 over 5 years?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's pretty negligible for the cost.
I think it makes sense as long as we're leasing to buy and not kind of getting stuck.
If there's an
in
option
lease
to,
lines, Right,
Exactly.
so,
Or you
Did
don't have
they
that.
say what the price would be to buy it after?
Yeah,
It's,
Oh, they missed that? Oh, no, no, no.
It's down there, so we would get to the payment of right here, if we bought it outright, it's $100,000.
and, you know, you can make a decision based on it and when the lease expires. We like this one, we don't like this one, we should buy one and let's lease another one, you know, or buy another, yeah.
I know we've got a mixed fleet between gas and diesel and cab over and not, and I think with maybe some of the challenges of bus driver retention and.
I did clarify that with
Bus driver
Christie.
choice when kind of the buses do.
Yeah, I did clarify that with Christie. I put that in my notes too, but towards the bottom here. One of the things in terms of the short nose versus the long nose is less expensive. The short nose or lack of is more expensive. Ryan, from a mechanical standpoint, said that the gas versus diesel is definitely how he would recommend we go. The one thing in terms of drivers, we have some individuals that have some height issues, or however you want to say it. So what they've actually done is they've added a camera, so you can see in front of the nose, and then they also have adjustable pedals. I hate to say it, before I heard that somebody would put like a block of wood and just things. So we are in a situation where kind of a succession to where our drivers, some of the concerns they had were of a short nose versus a long nose. We can make the long nose work.
Well, I asked that question at some point years ago, and they said that the long nose bus will not fit in the bus garage.
The
76
76 passenger, that's correct.
Okay,
The 71 and the one that's quoted does.
okay, just wanted to double check.
Nope,
on
and that is, Ryan confirmed that with me, because I'm like, why wouldn't we go 76?
Yeah.
5 students, it makes a big difference.
Yeah.
And he said, we can't fit it.
Yeah.
So the 71. Now, the short nose, I mean, you can see the cost difference between the short and long nose. So, again, I think we found the sweet spot in terms of driver retention, what bus drivers are looking for, what fits in our garage, and what financially we can handle at this point.
Any other questions? Everybody okay? All right. So entertain an approval for the buses. This is 2 buses, correct?
2 buses,
Two
and if
buses.
you can outline that you are in, I didn't put a recommendation on there, but if you're
This is a
in
lease.
terms of the lease,
Yes.
correct.
Okay. So I'll entertain a motion for the approval of leasing 2 buses. And then with the option of the buyout.
4 or 5 years.
for 5 years, yep.
I'll make that motion.
Motion made by Jody, do I have a second? Second by Derek. Any further questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed say no. Motion carried. Next up is our student meal eligibility during the federal government shutdown.
I just wanted to bring to the attention, because I think it leads to some other information about our community. And I had Crystal pull some numbers. So if you're not aware, the SNAP program has been halted, and we actually have 114 students that are affected by this. Now, it's not going to affect them here at school, but I think you take that number into account when knowing we have roughly 680 students in our district, where 114 students are affected by this program. We often talk about socioeconomic status, we talk about free and reduced and so on, and we'll talk about those numbers, especially budget-wise, but especially, again, just to understand what our community makeup is about. So nothing you have to do, that was simply just information for your knowing that. Because sometimes I get comments, well, the shutdown doesn't affect schools, or the budget freezes at the federal government doesn't affect schools. Yes, it does. And it does in some big ways. The shutdown of the Department of Education and how that affects special education and grants and so on. All that is going to hit our district. So I will always point those things out, just because there is some false narratives out there in terms of how does it really affect a school district.
I can't remember, does the food budget come out of Fund 10? Or is
No.
it-
Fund 50 is our, and I did, my recommendation this year was to keep the prices the same. Financially, that was not, I didn't want to, because we're in the red. But for the sake of what's going on with inflation and so on, we kept it. Now, again, understanding that, there's definitely there's more opportunity and room to make up some of those amounts, because they're much smaller. But yeah, Fund 50 is the fund.
And so then assuming this goes like past government shutdowns, when it comes back, do we get reimbursed for any amounts that we paid that would have been?
So that was where I was confused, and Chris had clarified it. This has nothing to do with school reimbursement.
Okay.
This has everything to do with families outside of school. So I was under the same impression, I'm thinking reimbursement here at
Right.
school. No, if they're part of that program, they get some alternate benefits for outside.
Okay.
But I think the reason I put it on here is to note that 114 of our students are affected by these outside, just an awareness of what our district makeup is. Any questions on that?
Do we know when Wisconsin SNAP benefits end? So I know like each state kind of has, yeah. that's what it is.
I think Governor Evers said November 1st, didn't he?
Oh,
For SNAP.
yes,
He
yes.
put something out.
It's, I don't know the exact date, but it's very close. Okay, you want me to keep going?
Yep.
All right, so, I'm gonna go through this slideshow, hopefully you've been able, I sent it separately too, but it's in, board docs, but I wanted to just go through and, make some comments, of what you're seeing. So from a budget standpoint, probably the biggest thing is, again, we're looking at the deficit. This is from a state understanding, and I'm just gonna highlight some things that I've actually received questions on. And again, I could care less what political affiliation you have. My job is to make sure that we do everything we can with the funds that we have here at the school. But I can tell you it's very frustrating with this administration. What I will tell you in terms of this and these numbers, I think the one that I've received most comments about about is the privatization of education. And so the questions that I've received are that 350, does Glenwood City have private school? No, we do not. Well, can students go to a private school? Yes. Well, how does that work? They get a tax reimbursement, or tax benefit from that and so forth. But if you look at that, that number continues to grow year after year. And in the budget, you'll see that we are paying roughly, I think this year it's 13,000. We're paying in Glenwood City, where I can say now I'm a taxpayer in my presentation, we're paying 13,000. And again, is that a lot of money? But we're paying for a student to go to a school in Milwaukee or wherever. Some of these things, again, when you look at, we were on the lucky side. And so sometimes we've been talking about, can we just get a break? Well, we got a break in terms of our overall formula. So again, that's just a synopsis of where we're at, especially this part. We're one of 26% that actually went up, 71% went down. So that's a good thing. Strategic wise, this is just my thoughts on the entire thing, and again, I'm not going to beat a dead horse, but in the same regard, you have to understand where I'm coming from as the superintendent. This was a term I actually stole from the Baird representative. He's like, Patrick, you have to ride the storm out. And I'm like, that's good, because I'm going to use that. My first year here, the investigation, we had 3 audits, the understanding of current processes, procedures. Second, I didn't make any changes because this was Tim Johnson's budget. This is my first budget, but it was working with Ron Johnson. And Ron is no longer here for obvious reasons. So I don't put a lot of stock into how that looked based on my notes in terms of I want this changed, I want this changed, I want this changed, to make sure that there's not gaps that existed. I know for a fact some of those did not take place. This year, or the summer here, in devising this, so right after this is when Deb was hired. And again, I feel very confident in what we have done in terms of budget, process, procedures, etc. However, we are looking at a deficit. Please note that last year we were in a deficit at the end of the year, and probably one of the bigger components that you'll see in the slide here was the compensation owed to staff members. And that was just a great thing to do. And I applaud the district for doing that. This is not great. You never want to see this, but in the same regard, when you have 29% fund balance and your policy is right around 20 to 22%, it's an easy thing to do. Now, in your approval tonight, you're giving me the thumbs up. If you agree, 3% raise for this current year for professional staff, which is a nice increase. Certainly, we're not going to reach inflation, but it is, and then 4%. And the reason for support staff that I'm recommending 4% is we are not that low, but in the same regard, if I look back and some of the issues that I've had is, staffing and also understanding that these people that make this type of wage, I often think, how do you do it? How do you put all these things together? And it's a lifestyle. It's a lot of different things in that, but we certainly are not towards the top. So my plan is, in terms of compensation, if you approve tonight the budget as it is to take those numbers. Deb puts a very comprehensive spreadsheet together. I add tabs based on where the district is, based on where the conference is, and comparables. And then it comes to you for approval. Okay. Other items to consider, again, we're looking at a deficit in 27-28, so the good part is we can still push that down the road based on the Baird model. We talked and we fully know about the audit for our facility. Our fund balance is right here at 29%. And again, 20% is our policy. And then to your point before, again, depending on what number, any restitution that is received would actually be additional revenue that is not in the budget. Questions on this slide? Okay, end of the year, this is where we talked. We were 101,000 over on last year's budget, and here's why. And again, I think when you think, lower revenue, the past compensation, we certainly invested into the CTE area, which has been a great return investment. Jared Keene has done an amazing job with those kids. Open enrollment has increased, and then there was some other smaller items, but still, they add up very quickly. In terms of this year, major changes, I just talked about the compensation. The back pay process would basically start with your approval in November, and then we'll be around the holiday season, which is kind of a bonus in terms of for families that, again, can understand. Basically, the back pay, if you're year-round calendar individuals, you will go all the way back to July. For teaching staff, it's back to September. These are all things that you've seen before, but we did have an increase. Probably the biggest part there is a loss ratio of 294. It's a really difficult number to not have an increase in our health insurance. We have roughly about 41 staff members out of 110 that take. Now 41, that doesn't include their spouses and so on. 41 staff members take insurance in the district. We did have 0% in dental. Doc talked about the Reliance insurance and so forth. We do have a fund balance, Fund 50, to your point there, in terms of food service. The good part about that is we have made up some of that, probably about 15,000. And again, that's great, but you think of how many students received proper meals this summer. I think that's the more positive factor in this. Fund 80 levy, I really feel good about this. There was a lot of time and a lot of discussions with Beth Davis, who supervises that program. Prior to us, she's never been presented with a budget. She's never had those discussions. And the purpose of Fund 80 is truly looking at what goes in needs to come out. And we feel really good about that 350 in terms of what it costs. Now, could that change? Absolutely. Between staffing and between things that go up, but in terms of narrowing down what Fund 80 looks like, which feeds our overall levy, we feel really good about that number. The thing that you just approved was the busing that was taken into account. The other thing that I want to outline here is, and I'll show you on the cap sheet, but this budget, keeping the mill rate where it is, because that's typically how people talk. But the increase in valuation has really, and I know you've seen that slide, but I put it in here again. The valuation has doubled. And so with that, Fund 39, we should have paid off. And unfortunately, what we were doing was we were taking this Fund 80 number, and it was in the 700s, 600s. But we weren't getting aided on that, so we weren't benefiting from it. Plus, we were building up the reserve, which you are only can do so many things with. So in this recommendation for the levy, it does take a double payment for Fund 39 to try and get that down. And the reason that I'm recommending that we do that is, number one, it keeps the mill rate so it doesn't go down, and then later on we have to bring it back up. The other part of that is Fund 39 is where we can go and actually borrow up to $1 million without going to a referendum. And right now, with what we are facing with our facility, could be a huge help. Unfortunately, we owe $650,000 yet, so we don't have that available. Again, my job is to make decisions for the next person. That's how I've always approached my job. Not what benefits necessarily me, but making sure that when I make these recommendations, we're looking at the better of the district for 5, 10, 20 years. Any questions on any of these major changes? Okay, so here's what we're looking at. And again, you have to be careful because some of the bigger things in this includes these valuations where the total levy, but also equalized value. You know, what is the land that you live on in here worth? And you can see where they have gone from 227 in 2011 to 527. I mean, and just, you take that into account now, does that mean everybody thinks, hey, I can turn around and sell my property for more? Maybe, maybe not, we'll see. So again, some of these slides you have seen, but I wanted to go through. So I am recommending a mill rate of 7, and your goal as a district is try and keep this as equal or steady, I shouldn't say equal, but steady as possible. You take this down, what's gonna happen is if we have to go back up, now their taxes are really gonna see an increase. Now, I'm not saying that some people aren't gonna see an increase in their taxes, but it's gonna be minimal based on this year. Any questions on the mill rate?
For some reason, there was another PowerPoint slide in the back. The last 3 years are different. Is that because?
I had to go back and yes, I had to do some cleanup.
Okay.
Part of it is some of the numbers were based on what the annual meeting was approved at, not the full budget.
Okay.
So I went back and actually corrected and made sure it was all. So I looked at the historical data and went back and recreated these slides.
It's not drastic, but.
Yeah, no, I saw the same thing and it's like, well, wait, and again, I was building off of a different slide deck that existed around here instead of going back, and that's on my fault. I was like, I'm gonna create it from scratch. Here is the revenue cap sheet, and again, I will be more than happy to explain anything on this item or on this document, but this is basically right here is where your mill rate is determined. Your auto calculate is right here. DVI data is right here, but these are based on data points that we submit with reports. And then we enter these amounts based on what's in Skyward. So right here, this is the max that we can levy. You take the 67,000 away from that number and you get right here. And this is the maximum amount of revenue that we can go to the taxpayers and say, this is what we want to tax you at. This right here is the double payment in Fund 39. And again, I just want to make sure that the board is comfortable with that. That is a double payment, but again, we still owe roughly 50,000 on that. And then this is the true number of Fund 80, which is always, it's a separate levy, but it takes in the whole picture. So we are at 7% or $7. I put this in there for the end of meeting too, but this is from 2024. A lot of people just go right to but it talks about TIF. It also talks about Fund 38, what districts have, referendum debt that people have. And again, you can look at where we're at and so forth. Okay. I put this in there just if you have questions about again, we were part of the 26% that actually increased, 70% did increase. How did they get to that number? It's still very confusing, but if you're interested, read that.
That was gonna be one of my questions for next year, but is there anything we can do to make sure we kind of stay in that, increased benefit area? Yeah.
Yeah, don't lose kids. And yeah, there's a variety that goes into that, but read through this and we're a positively aided district, and there's certain things that put us in that position, but also the economic component is in that. Total levy per year, so you can see what we have levied, that number that I showed you. As we go, we have equalized value, which we talked about. Here is our fund balance. And again, just for especially the new board members, I took over right between these two, and just changes I underspent by $1 million. And the reason I did that is I stopped things just based on the investigation, based on things that seemed, it just didn't make sense. So we underspent, plus we had 3 audits going at the same time, and that is unheard of. So there was a lot that went into that. But the good part is, there's quite a few districts that, according to Baird, they're down here or here. So that does work in our favor in terms of fund balance. Here is the most up-to-date enrollment. So to your point, Jordan, how do we stay away from that 71? We've got to continue to try and build. We got to flip a couple things. Number one, our open enrollment. Flip it in the positive, or we at least work towards it. And I would say that our decision to do eCampus has helped, because every student helps in that regard. The other part is again, we can't push people to have babies, but in the same regard, if you look at where our classes are, you can see how, just even in the last 10 years, going from classes of possibly 60, I don't know what you guys graduated with, those of you that went here, to where we are right now. But you can see, from the standpoint of, I don't know why this didn't populate. I will fix that. But you can see, where these classes are, where our middle school is pretty balanced in terms of 40 to 45. And then we have a couple of big classes and small classes. So I don't know why they did that, but I will get that fixed. Total FTE for revenue limit. This is the other one that in the calculation that I basically started from scratch. So I wanted you to know, in terms of butts in the seat, but there's a formula behind it. It's talking about 40% of summer school. It's talking about kindergarten and 4K percentages and so on. And again, if you have any questions, I can be happy to explain these slides to you in detail. Open enrollment, you can see we're on the wrong side of that. And so that's definitely something that we're working on to try and change. We want this trend to continue to go down. And basically that's doing things like making sure our building is respectable, making sure our programming is there. I think we have some of the best teachers that I've been around in our science department and so on. Math with Ms. Blackmore, Dr. Ritola. We just have some really talented individuals. And so making those, putting those out there. Mr. Lamb, who's, again, Teacher of the Year last year. So we have to celebrate those and make sure that those are known, but also take care of our facilities and get past this black eye that we talked about at the start of the year, or to start tonight's meeting. Open enrollment lost revenue, and again, I'm not going to go through that part. Here's the part where last board meeting that we had in terms of a work session, I did ask the question, can you take an operating and bond referendum and combine them? So oftentimes that's the only options you have to increase your revenue for a school district. We will talk more about this at our work session on November 10th, I believe, 10th or 11th, 10th. But I would encourage you to read this. This is an email from Marquez, and it talks about the question of, does it have to be just a bond, or can it be both? And and so forth. So I encourage you to read that. These just are some stats from Baird, and again, what I'll say about the Baird piece is I really don't, you guys have kind of been at a disadvantage as a board because we didn't have a Baird model or you didn't have a Baird model for a number of years. And so this will show you what type of data to make informed decisions. It talks about referendum, and there's just some really good data to look at. There's also comparative data here in terms of where we are with fund balance compared to other districts in our conference. So again, some good information there just to compare and see how are we doing. Are we doing similar things? Certainly circumstances change in every district. Talk about strategic plan, our goals, of course, the audit that we talked about. The rest of these slides are things that we have already discussed. So with that said, I'm going to go back to, if you look at in your board docs, I've already put a recommendation in there for the motion. You certainly can deviate from that if you don't agree. But basically the motion to approve the budget is there. And then the second question below that is the levy at 7. And then this is what we would certify with the state.
All right. Does anybody want to make a motion to approve the 2025-26 school district of Glenwood City budget that's been presented, titled 2025-26 final budget adoption for the recommended DPI format?
I'll make a motion.
Motion is made by Derek. Is there a second? Jordan, second by Jordan. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, say no. Motion carried. Then we have the 2025-26 levy. I'll entertain a motion to approve the 2025 all fund tax levy for the school district of Glenwood in the total amount of $3,694,111 to be apportioned as certified in the GCS revenue limit worksheet for 2025-26 with a levy rate of $7 and to authorize the district administrator and accountant to submit the official PI 401 levy certification to the Department of Public Instruction.
So moved.
Motion made by Chuck. Do I have a second?
Second.
Second by Scott. Any further discussion?
Just more clarifying, on that number, does that get us then to the max number with the, or are we still below the max or pretty much?
No, that basically is in terms of the total, and I took that from the revenue cap sheet. So
It includes the additional 325 that.
yes,
The governor-
yep, it puts everything into account. Because if you look at this document, you know, again, the yellow is already what data is put in by the DPI.
Any other questions? Hearing none, all those in favor say aye. Opposed, say no. Motion carried. There are no communications. We do have our next scheduled meeting November 10th. And I'll entertain a motion to adjourn so people can go to a concert.
Motion to adjourn.
Motion by Scott, do I have a second?
Jordan's got.
Give it to Jordan. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
We are adjourned.
All right. I will see you on the 10th and go to the concert if you would like.
Ashley, can you ever send me the working file list of the maintenance?
Yeah, I sent it to next. Because I had them, I didn't have access to it, and then I sent it